All right, good evening. Welcome to this meeting, October 10th, of the Webster Groves School Board. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? If there are no changes, I would accept a motion to approve.
The agenda?
Second. All those in favor say aye. Anybody opposed? All right, that carries. We are on to public comment. We did not receive any written public comments, but we do have one public comment. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess it's Mr. Buck. Come on up. Yes, please.
I'm here to make a comment on your agenda, two things on your agenda: the desirable characteristics of a new superintendent and the strategic plan, and they're both very related. I did not fill out this community survey because I wanted to come here and verbalize my thoughts. Here is my one desirable characteristic for a new superintendent, for what it's worth. It comes from a 1997 TV commercial from Apple, my favorite commercial of all time. It shows visuals of Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Walt Disney, Amelia Earhart, Picasso, Frank Lloyd Wright, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Ted Turner, etc., etc. And this is the copy. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They are not fond of rules. They have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do. Apple, think different. I want a superintendent who thinks differently. I think John Simpson has thought a lot differently. Starting, John, I think with School for Today, which I refer to as School for Tomorrow. But I think that was an example of somebody thinking outside the box, of trying to move the district forward in a new and different way, and I love that about you. Relative to the strategic plan, as Jason knows, I've had a lot of different thoughts about curriculum and new courses, such as grace, character education, leadership, creativity, et cetera, et cetera. But what's interesting about the people that I just mentioned, if you research them, almost to a person, they were no better than average students. They weren't straight A students. They didn't have 4.0 GPAs. They were average students at best. I mean, Einstein himself, I don't even think he learned to talk until he was 5. So the point is that you can't always equate impact on the world with grade point average or GPA. And of all the things that I've shared with Jason and the curriculum committee over time, this is my number one thing at the top of my pyramid, which is I would rethink the gifted program. I would reinvent it based on the philosophy that all kids are gifted, not just 2 or 3% of them, that all kids possess gifts, that all kids have abilities, all kids have skills, all kids have gifts, all kids have passions. And the obligation of an education system, I think, is to help every kid identify what those are, to discover them, to nurture them, and to develop them onto the future, which leads to the purpose on the strategic plan. And see, I would totally rethink that as well. But anyway, that's it. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is our MSBA presentation. I think there's two parts to this presentation. One, I think I just heard that Pam is doing about a rebate check, and then we'll get into our stakeholder survey and focus group results.
So
Ms.
good evening.
Frazier.
Well, thanks for having me. I am here this morning representing Missouri School Board Association's P-Card program, and I'm here to give the district this check for $4,405.70. The district has been part of this P-Card program since 2006. During that time, they have earned over $40,000 in rebates from the program. This is the district's second largest rebate, right behind last year's, and it's the 10th largest rebate in the state this year. So here you go. The check will be delivered via ACH unless your CFO would rather have it a different method. Thank you.
Frazier. All right, moving on to the Learning Showcase, the Frick Initiative at Webster Groves High School.
Good evening to you all. We are very excited to continue our Learning Showcase, where we feature various programs throughout the district. Tonight's presentation is slightly unique in that we don't have students here this evening. We're not sharing something that's already in place. We are actually sharing with you a concept, an idea that we look forward to implementing. And tonight is really the first unveiling of this program, this initiative in a public forum. And so we're excited to have Brian Keller, our Science and Social Studies Coordinator, here with us this evening, who's going to share some details of 2 years worth of work on this program with many of our staff across the district. So thank you, Brian, for being here.
Thanks for having me, and I look forward to talking to you about the Frick Center for Civic Engagement. And so just a little bit background. You can go to the next slide. So we were, Bob and Barbara Frick reached out to us with an opportunity that we couldn't pass up. As part of the Frick Initiative, which is a massive grant at the WashU campus around these ideas of civil discourse, free speech, personal responsibility, free and open market economies, they approached us and said, what do you got? And so we kind of sat in a room and we brainstormed some ideas, things that we could come up with to meet these needs within our district. And so with that, we started working with a group of people within the district and outside the district. So over the last couple of years, we have made connections. We've developed a team of people to kind of work on this project, coming together, bringing in ideas, bringing in thoughts, and seeing what the potential for this program could be. And out of this work, we wrote this purpose and principles. If you go to the next one for me. So the purpose and principles of the Frick Center for Civic Engagement is a student-centered program that challenges participants to engage with economic, social, political, and moral factors and their influence on civil discourse, free speech, personal responsibility, and policy making. Students will choose a mentor-guided pathway where they will actively contribute to community-based initiatives that refine and enhance their academic and practical skills, positioning them as catalysts for positive societal change. This comprehensive approach fosters a deep understanding of responsible citizenship and equips students for impactful engagement in their chosen fields. And so out of that, we said, okay, what are we going to do with this? And so we went into this idea of components of the Frick Center for Civic Engagement. So senior level students would engage in what is a capstone project in defense. And that would be the student outcome, much the same way that we do our doctorate program. Or if you get a degree in that, you have to defend your thesis. So we're going to kind of go through that process. Students are going to spend the year in the Frick Center for Civic Engagement working on a project, working with mentors to develop this, okay? We're going to talk about pathway engagement. Where do they see themselves taking this in the future? After they leave us, how would this engage in their life after high school. Then we're going to develop a civil discourse speaker series where we actually bring in adults to display civil discourse in front of students. What does that look like for our students? How do we have discourse and walk away not wanting to hate each other? How do we find that common ground with each other? And then we were going to work on the curriculum development of this piece. And so there was the 4 components that we've been working on over the last 2 years to kind of develop this. So the capstone project in defense, it's basically a thesis paper, if you go to the next slide if you don't mind, addressing a community need. They need to find a problem in their community, whether it be local, state, national, tribal, or international. Find a problem or find a need in the community and figure out how to meet that need. They're going to work on a thesis supported by research. They're going to do the research. They're going to figure out what challenges, what problems, what things came out in their research. There's an activism component. They're not just doing this just to do it. They have to create a plan to implement this solution, either in school or out of school. And then they're also going to work on a portfolio, student portfolio, to kind of showcase everything that they've done through the capstone work of this project. So with that, we kind of dug a little bit deeper. What does it look like for students in both the 2 semesters? I will say that this is a school within a school model. Okay, it will be much like the Thrive Incubator. It will be 3 hours of their day, every day of the week, for an entire year working on this project. It's going to be intense. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be a lot of fun. They're going to do some pathway exploration. What potential opportunities do they see themselves doing outside of high school after they graduate? They're going to be working on case studies. Where have we seen this before? They're going to be working on AP research curriculum. It may not necessarily be an AP course, but they'll be working through that research curriculum. They're going to be engaging in civil discourse. We're going to kind of work through the process of what does civil discourse look like. Then we're going to work on data science. The National Council of Teachers of Math, the NCSS, National Council for the Social Studies. All of those groups have put out a position statement around the importance around data science. Okay? We can't argue with data, and so that's what we're going to do is how do they collect data, or how do we look at data, how do we evaluate that to drive our decision. We're going to work on digital literacy. There's also 7 states across the nation that have passed the Civic Seal, and that's just civic capstone project through their 4 years. We're going to work on that. They're also going to do a book study. Take a book, whether it be a biography or nonfiction text, and really dig into that book and what did that person do to enact change within their society. And then that second semester, the schedule opens up for the students. It's going to be a lot of them doing the work, working with their mentor. We're looking at internship opportunities where they spend 6 to 8 weeks with a mentor in their field, doing work with their mentor kind of around their pathway. And so we're going to work through that. Active research, capstone project. They're also going to plan the next speaker series. They are going to have to organize that entire event, find those speakers, find the topic, plan the party. And so we're going to kind of go through that. And then we're going to have individual and small group instruction to meet students where they need on their project. So how do we do that? So we go through this pathway engagement. So we've identified, if you go to the next slide, we've identified this potential opportunities for pathways. What do students engage in? We actually polled our students. We sent out all of our sophomores last year, which would be the first cohort of this course. We asked them what they're interested in. What do they want to pursue? And then we found some common themes out of those, and that's what these came forward. Then I started working with the Chelsea Center. Okay, because they're doing a lot of this work already in the Chelsea Center, and so we would just want to connect with the Chelsea because they're doing this work. We don't have to recreate the wheel. So Carrie Aarons and I are working on this project together so that we can pull forward how this looks for our students in the Frick Center for Civic Engagement. Okay? Yeah, you can go ahead. And then the third part is the Frick Speaker Series. And so this is the idea that we modeling what we want to see from our students so that they understand what it should look like, okay? And we can talk about how things should be when it comes to civil discourse. If we go to the next one. So the example I would bring you is the Janus Forum at Brown University. This is just one example where Ezra Klein and Jeff Orlowski-Yang came together and they talked about, is social media a threat to our democracy? And they were on stage together having civil discourse. The students led the conversation in a panel discussion type way. They asked the questions, and Ezra and Jeff just kind of had civil discourse, and we learned from that observation. So then we jump into the curriculum development. What does this look like? It would be 3 high school credits. We're talking about an ELA elective, a social studies elective, and a practical fine arts elective. I've been calling it, just because it's easier for me, the pathway elective. So that would be their pathway work and how they're doing that. I've met with folks at WashU and UMSL. We have a partnership developed with WashU. We're still working on the details with that for dual credit with WashU for this program. And then we kind of get a little bit more in the weeds of what these courses would look like. We're not settled on anything yet. We're still in a lot of discussions around the coursework, getting into the granular details of the project. But this is kind of the direction that we're heading. And then we're talking about how do we meet the standards within those each components so that they are walking away with those 3 credits. And that's what we've been working through currently. So that's kind of in a nutshell the Frick Center for Civic Engagement. We're actually titling the course for the greater good so that we can pull students into that project. And I look forward to hearing from you, and I can answer any questions if you have any.
Right. Anybody have questions?
I do. When you polled the students last year, did you ask like what would motivate? I mean, I see they're going to get 3 credits, and that's awesome, but it also seems like a lot of work. Did you poll them and ask like what would motivate them to take this path? I mean, I'm sure some are, but like I guess I'm curious as to what their answers were.
So one of the questions was, how interested are you in engaging in this program? And it was really fascinating to really get into the data of those answers, because I was curious to see how. So it wasn't an anonymous survey. I actually had student data because I asked them to get involved in the planning process. And that's something we're working through this year. And 60 of our sophomores, last year's sophomores, so the current juniors, came forward and said, we're interested in both helping develop this program and we are interested in getting involved. And then I dug a little bit of digging, and I wanted to see the demographics, because I just wanted to see what cross-section of students we would see. And it was a very diverse group of people. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just painting a great picture of the district and how our students can engage in this program. So yes.
Question. Are there any prerequisites that students need to take this course? Sorry, I need to look at you, but also talk in the mic. Sorry. Okay.
So we have been talking about the prerequisite piece. All of our students in our current government course are having some of these components come out in the government course. So they're actually engaging in civil discourse in their government classes right now. That's the only real prerequisite to this program, is that they have successful completion of government, which every one of our students will do. So that's what we're doing.
And will there be like a class size limit, or are you hoping to take any student who's interested?
We've been grappling with that idea. I would be thrilled to have that problem. And I know that we probably will have a class size limit the initial year. It's going to come down to a lot of the staffing pieces and how we can make that work, which we've already started the conversations around that. So, and I should add too, also one of the things that we're doing is, as part of the Frick initiative, they wanted something that could either be replicated or opened up to other districts. And so that's the goal for 26-27, is we're going to take this first year as year 0, and then we're going to open it up like a CAPS program where students can come in from other districts, and that we'll see that program grow out of that work.
Thank you.
add to that idea that starting off, we're using the Thrive model. 25 students is kind of our target range for the beginning of the work. And you may have noticed, you may not have noticed, on the list of individuals who've been involved, we have several people from Kirkwood School District who've actually been a part of the planning process. A lot of districts don't have something that exists like this, and so we're very much looking at how do we partner with other districts for kids who take that required government course, they're passionate about it, they have a direction in law or they have a direction in nonprofit, but do we offer something like that at the high school level for this group of kids based on our pathway conversation? And we know other districts have those kids as well. And so we really are excited about this opportunity and being able to offer that not only for our kids, but also for other kids in other districts.
I'm curious about how the mentorship will work for this program. Is there going to be specific staff members at Webster for each category, or is it going to be a more general?
So we're actually looking outside. So we're going to have a teacher or two teachers working through the program at the Frick Center for Civic Engagement who will be kind of guiding the students through that. But we're going to bring in a lot of outside folks. I have been working very hard over the last 2 years to develop those connections with folks, and so that we have potential folks within each pathway. And then we're also going to put some of that work on the students to help us identify that person that would support them the best as well. So yes.
And then for the classroom setting, would it be like a classroom where students just meet together and work individually, or would it be more of a group setting?
It's going to be both. That's a great question. It's going to be a little bit of both. We're going to meet students where they're at. We have to do some front loading and downloading of information so that you can be successful in that second semester of the course. So that first semester, we're going to do some seminars, small group meetings, and then we also talked about having the pathway groups having like a small cohort. So if you're in the policy and politics pathway and there's other students in that, you're going to be in a cohort working together, bouncing ideas off each other. The idea, and I always think about my 4th grade classroom, open space, small tables, and try to take the direct instruction out of the equation as much as possible to where you're doing the work, you're finding out what you need, and then that teacher's kind of, like I see it as a project manager, they're managing all of the pieces that you need for your project.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, thank you for all the thought and work that you guys are putting into this. This is awesome. I know that my kids are always asking me, what the heck do I need social studies for or whatever. So this is a perfect reason, a way for them to see what the purpose is. This is probably showing my age. Would this, are we looking at a possible debate team? Has that come up or anything like that?
We have been talking a lot about that, and the landscape around debate has become very different. And so we are trying to stay away from debate, but go to more of discussion and dialogue, because debate, there's a winner and a loser, right? It's always a competition. And so we try to steer away from the debate. There will be some components of debate. We do have a debate team at the high school, and so we're just going to let them do their thing there. But this is more about discussion and dialogue and discourse versus debate.
Rihanna said, working with like other people. So like I know that there are a few people from Kirkwood on the list. So maybe in future years, or maybe you've talked about it before, but like could this be a class where I'm working with someone that's also at Kirkwood High School and we're doing the same project? Or is this like more of like a in the school thing?
I see this as a hub of civic learning. I see this as groups coming together. You think about like Model UN. If you've ever engaged in that, we have districts coming from all over the state coming together to do Model UN stuff together. I see this program as being that. So people coming in, and you would be working with other folks across. And so like Thrive, how they have their days where they're working outside in the field, we would have those field days within our program, and so that you're actually working with your mentor. And you may have other folks from Kirkwood or Brentwood or Maplewood, Richmond Heights, or U City, or whomever's coming into the program, working alongside those students in that program.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Keller? Seeing none, thank you both for your work and effort on this. It's really an exciting initiative and opportunity for our students. Dr. Adams.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to share what our next step is. So in December, when we traditionally bring new course descriptions to you, the 3 courses that will be offered as part of the Frick Center for Civic Engagement will be a part of that conversation. So we will have more specifics about course titles, the actual descriptions, what kids are getting credit for specifically, in partnership with all of these exciting opportunities. What are they actually getting credit for? So more to come on that.
Thank you both. All right, next on the agenda is, as you all know, we have that coming up next week. I think there's some discussion about travel and who's riding with who, so if you have any questions about that, we can team up and ride together. Most of us, I think, are heading down Thursday morning, so anybody have any questions, or Dr. Simpson, anything else you want to add about MSBA?
No.
Okay. Awesome. Board calendar, I don't think there's anything new on that either. Anybody has questions, we can answer it, but if not, all right. Committee updates. Anybody want to have updates on the committees that they represent?
An update about the calendar committee, which for the first time ever was seamless and painless and is only meeting once this year, I believe. And thanks to Sandy for doing such a good job keeping everything smooth, and the calendar, the way it lays out, also was helpful. So anyway, that committee is doing very well.
An update about the safety and security meeting. Tina did a great job leading our first meeting. I think also post just the way the school year started, and just addressing, the normal concerns that come up with just the reality of, unfortunately, what schools have to also think about with safety, but just the thoughtfulness behind all the planning, hearing about, I think it was neat for me to hear about all the ways Raptor has changed and really grown and become really sophisticated in terms of how to use it to protect our kids and to keep all the learners, big and small, safe. So I appreciated that piece and hearing how the high school was piloting all those pieces. So kudos to Tina and the counselors and our SROs and just everyone who in the day-to-day, in addition to teaching and learning, has to also at the forefront figure out how to keep safety and security, the physical well-being of our kids also at the forefront.
I can give an update on the curriculum committee. Jason, thanks. You always start with the community agreement, and I appreciate that. Last time we heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, from the counselor, and folks had questions, and they were talking about the strengths and maybe some opportunities there. I think they're in year 2 now of their curriculum. And we heard about math, from Susan Bergman. So, yeah, good stuff. Great mix of community as well. I appreciate that.
I can run down my list. So in the finance committee, everything, as I always say, that we talk about in finance, we also talk about here. So we've discussed some Prop S updates, reviewed the monthly financial reports and the tax rate. And I think the only thing that we've done there that we haven't brought here is the committee's looking to update the bylaws to be consistent with the committee handbook. So that should come to us at some point here soon. Then the wellness committee kicked off. We reviewed our district wellness policy and really just started planning for the year. We discussed some of the current barriers to health within our district. Some topics that came up were access to counselors and how can we have students get more sleep and less screen time? I don't know if there's a solution to that. And we discussed some potential objectives to address those barriers. And I think we'll just start with the next meeting, kind of putting the plan together and determining what we're going to focus on for the year. Christine covered curriculum. Strategic planning we'll discuss tonight. And then so I serve as a liaison to the Webster Groves Parks and Recreation Commission. So I've been to 2 meetings so far, and the updates there are the commission voted to recommend to City Council to name the new recreation complex after Benny Gordon Jr. And the City Council did actually approve that. So that will be the name of our new rec complex. And then we also, in the last meeting, reviewed the proposed fee schedule for the recreation facilities for the upcoming year. So the commission will vote to approve the recommended fee schedule, and then that will go to City Council for final for them to approve it. And that's it.
Right. I am the liaison to the Building Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, I missed the last meeting because we were in this room interviewing folks to help us with the superintendent search. So other than I know they discussed a lot about Prop S updates. So that's all I have to say about that at the moment. All right. Seeing no other committee updates, we will move on to our conversation with MSBA about our stakeholder survey results and focus group results. Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. I was going to say, before we got started on this, that there's probably not a single class in high school or college that I would want to retake, much less take just on my own. But the course that we were talking about just at the beginning of this board meeting, I would definitely enjoy taking that class. So that's very, very impressive. So you should have your stakeholder survey report in front of you, and I just want to talk a little bit about that, and then we also participated in 3 focus groups this afternoon, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Your stakeholder feedback survey, you had very good participation across the board. Obviously, your parent group really turned out in large numbers to participate in this. I can't speak to historically how the district's survey responses are with faculty, staff, admin, but I can tell you from looking at other districts that have gone through the stakeholder survey, your district had a really good turnout. As you look at strengths and the weaknesses for Webster Groves, I'll just pose this question back to you as a similar question that we posed to the focus groups, amongst others. But I guess I would be curious if you felt like the strengths that were identified and the weaknesses or the opportunities that were identified, if you feel like that accurately reflects where you see things, if there's things that you were surprised that were included or felt like they should have been included.
Thoughts they want to share?
I noticed how community seems to that's like the key word there. That did not surprise me, so that I was kind of expecting that. But I do know that that's going to be a very big, the community as a whole, and the thought about the community and how people feel about being in the community and all those things are going to be a big role.
I was going to say, just for those following along that can't see it, I'm happy to read out It's the main four strengths: strong sense of community, dedicated and high-quality teachers and staff, commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and academic and extracurricular opportunities. And yeah, I mean, I think these are all probably ones that I would put towards the top as well. And I guess I feel like as you think about our school district, these are things that are inherently ingrained in Webster Groves.
Think about community and the engagement that comes across here, just sort of seeing the theme of relationships and how relationships intersect with a lot of these strengths. I think that the importance of that is clear to me after reading these things as well.
Looking at your challenges, did you feel like, and the reason I want to get your clarification is this becomes a document that everyone who applies for the position, if they're really interested in this position, they're going to be looking at this document to get a little more understanding of what's going on in Webster Groves. So it helps us when we're having those conversations with your candidates. If there's things in this that you would want to have expanded upon, then we're able to do that. So your challenges, I'll take Alex's place on this one. Your 4 challenges that were identified: retaining quality teachers and staff, political and external influences, resource allocation, and student academic performance and rigor.
At the last one and wondering, I think that ACT scores and number of scholarships, isn't that stuff we have to report for state? And yet it's not a true representative of our schools when we just heard about this and Thrive, and we've got other, like the Chelsea Center, we've got a lot of experiential education. I just don't know that that's a true I don't think that's a weakness. I'm not sure that that's true, I guess I should say.
What's important about that one is that there's apparently perception of this, and I think a new superintendent for our school district would probably need to be aware that this is the perception, whether it's accurate or not. That's how I would look at it.
Now, I will also tell you, when you look at the strengths and the challenges, those comments are reflective of numerous comments that are similar to that. So MSBA uses additional staff. They didn't use us because they didn't want that unintended bias, because, as we're looking at it and thinking about you all, they wanted it to be more objective. So those comments are comments that they saw in numerous iterations. They just happened to pull that specific person's comment as a reflection of those thoughts. So if you see that on there, there were several comments to initiate a theme, so to speak.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to ask one question because I'm kind of refusing myself. Does it get communicated as it's a perception and not necessarily that it's an accuracy?
To the candidates?
When it goes out to like you said, it's going to be a document that goes out to people. Does it get communicated as a...
Yes, this is a perception, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I might add to that, yes, and anybody who does their work is going to see pretty quickly, in the field, we can pretty quickly go into an APR, and then we can dig deeper and see that Webster Groves is performing pretty darn well. And Ms. Shear, to your point, in the focus groups, you kind of encapsulated kind of where the focus groups came to, that it was perhaps a communication or a perception issue because they know the good things, and districts are challenged with that all the time. I know there's always room for growth. I'm sure here, everywhere else too, is challenged with that.
Are you able to see if this sentiment is amongst the entire group of respondents, so each subgroup, or is it something that came predominantly from like the community or our parents? Are you able to dig a little deeper into that to see actually who holds that perception?
That's a good question. Because of the time frame on the turnaround, I don't have that in front of me. I can ask them if they can aggregate that out by subgroup. I know we were able to aggregate out the desired skills and qualifications by subgroup. So I can see if they can, and if they can, I'll certainly make that available for you.
I think it would be helpful, especially if this is going to be used as a recruitment tool, just to identify exactly where that perception is coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is one of the things I do want to mention. You have a report that does have your aggregated subgroups out, and so you can kind of see as you start to look at your desired skills and qualifications, you've got the top 10, and those are a combination of personal and professional attributes. I think what you'll notice is for each subgroup, they're a little bit different, but probably very similar as far as your top 5 or 6. Just making sure there's no questions about that. I'm going to bounce to the focus groups a little bit because I think this is a good place to segue to that. So your focus groups, our goal was really to use those focus groups. We had a community parent group, admin team group, and your faculty staff group, and sharing this data with them, asking them to validate it. Do you agree with what came out of the report from a strengths and weaknesses? If not, what should have been included or what shouldn't have been included? And then we looked at the desired skills and qualifications and asked each of those specific focus groups to identify what they felt were the top 3 to 4, depending on how much time we had in each one, desired qualification that of those that are listed, to see are they similar to what the aggregated data showed, similar to what the cumulative data showed, or specific to that focus group. In addition to that, we worked on identifying action steps. So if of those top 2 or 3, 4 things, for the new superintendent coming in, what would that specific focus group expect to see and hear from the new superintendent to give them confidence that they're actually addressing, working towards those important attributes that have been identified. You've got a printout hot off the press because those are actually the notes from the focus groups in front of you that were printed out. In addition, we did an activity, and I don't have, we'll scan these and give these to you later, but we did an activity that I think Webster Groves is familiar with, or it's unique to Webster Groves, but it's I wish, I wonder, I worry. And essentially we asked all of the participants in each group to complete that process directed to the new superintendent, kind of almost a personal letter on what is on their mind relative to coming into this new position. So I think that will give you a lot of really good information as well. We'll take that information along with the survey data, and what that allows us to do is start looking at crafting draft interview questions for the screening process and for the final interview questions. Again, they're your questions. We're going to just try to pull some samples together for you to start working from. But they're going to be tied back to those things that came out of the survey and out of the focus groups that rose to being the most important. So that when you're looking at questions that you want to pose to candidates, that you're asking things that have resonated through that feedback, in addition to whatever feedback that the board itself is wanting to collect through that interview process. So, questions about the focus group? I got it on my phone. I don't have a copy of it in front of me. So I was just going to, I want to walk through kind of the way that those notes are prepared for you. If we asked each group, is there anything that wasn't listed on the strengths that should be? You'll see in each of those groups, we've added their comments that they felt like should be. In your community group, a sense of community and tradition wasn't necessarily reflected in the survey, but they felt that that is something that is very much a strength of the school district, is the tradition that Webster Groves has. Then you can see additional challenges that they didn't feel like necessarily were reflected to the extent they should have been or at all. And then you'll see that the four, for this first group, they had four their top skill or the top desired qualification was addressing equity and diversity. We spent a lot of time talking about that in that community group. And then you'll see the things that they felt like would be important to see and hear from the new superintendent that would indicate to them that they're addressing that issue.
Can you talk a little bit more about when the community groups are talking about equity and diversity, when they're talking about there is room to grow, what does that look like? What are they talking about? Did they talk in specifics around that? Sorry, I'm wearing double glasses. Fourth graders called me out earlier.
And I'll let Chris and Pam correct me if I misrepresent this. The comments that I took away were that the district is very much putting in place specific actions and programs around diversity and equity. They want to ensure that equity is reflected in not just the typical categories that we think of, but also financial equity and disabilities. And so really just making sure that all of that is incorporated in that conversation, and then moving beyond the maybe the planning and into the implementation of more action steps in that regard.
Yeah, the only thing I would do is underscore that point, that they thought there was a good framework in place and wanted to see it followed through. They also wanted to see quantitative objectivity to goal setting for those. So I don't know what they're, how familiar they are with the strategic plan, if that is already in place, but that was something that was broad consensus of that objectivity. I'm done. I'm sorry, forgot to touch the button.
So the three groups were community, is administrators, and then staff. That includes teachers?
Yeah.
Okay. Were any students included in the focus groups?
There were no students.
Okay. Well, I would invite our student representatives to share with us, not necessarily now, but maybe you could think about some of these questions and email us or something. I'd love your thoughts.
I was looking at the strengths and the weaknesses, and I kind of agree with what everyone stated. I think there is kind of not even a Webster issue, but a worldwide issue of what you get on a test or what you get on an ACT determines your intelligence in sort of a way. And I mean, I think everyone's fallen victim to that before. I mean, but I think that that's something that's just going to take a while to change if it does change, because that's kind of how we frameworked it in the past. That's how you get money off of scholarships. That's how you go to college. That's how some people even get jobs, is based upon how they do well in school. So I think if we're going to change that perception, it's going to take a lot of just how we do that. So I don't think I see that as a challenge, but to be honest, I think everyone on planet Earth has that challenge. So I think that's okay.
I'm going to go off what Caden said. I agree with what he's saying about ACT scores and other test scores being a big part, just in general, especially in the United States for college. I don't think that's specifically just a Webster issue, so I think it's just like everyone is facing this, and it's also like we have really good test scores, and that reflects really good for students applying to college and people coming into the district. So I don't see it as a challenge.
I don't know if you were able to take the survey, but if you'd like to add any additional thoughts, I really would, I would appreciate hearing your thoughts on all of this. Thanks.
So I would say for the focus groups, the diversity equity was a thread through all three of them. That's probably the one that, and I would say facilities would be the other area that was a common thread that, needing to address aging facilities. So when you start thinking about perceptions, this came out of two of the groups. The perception of, or and it was actually, it's recruits, hires, and develops effective staff was number one in the cumulative. But the question was asked of the community and for our administrative focus group was, is that really a Webster Grove issue, or is it more of a perception of just public education in general that there's fewer teachers getting into the field? And so not sure that your data would reflect that you're turning over a lot of employees to rate as number one, but again, that may be a perception issue more than a reality issue.
I guess I would just say the niche report that just came out had Webster Grove's teachers rated as, what was it, like third in state, fourth in state? I mean, it was really high. So again, to Tara's earlier point, perception is one thing, but and it's only one report, but I think that was at least a data point.
So again, as you look at the data from the survey, as you look at the notes, and we'll get you the actual individual comments that each of them have shared that wanted to share on and they're all anonymous, and we've shared with them. Unless they put their name on it, it would be anonymous. We'll provide that to you. As you're thinking about questions, scenarios that you would want to pose to candidates, I think those are going to be the things that are going to help guide you as you're looking at the sample questions that we're going to provide you. So.
I just add too, on the focus group, when you look through that summary, there's a different number of the top four at the end of each group. The first group this morning just had one top skill. That was just due to time. So you'll see different, like one group had one item they really honed in on, and then there were action steps underneath that, where other groups had four. So when you look at that, they're not equal, and that was just because of the time constraints.
Yeah, and that's a kind of a product of letting the group do as they wish in that focus group, because they all had equal time, but they got very fixated on just one.
I will say I felt that all three of your focus groups were very genuinely engaged in the conversations, very sincere in their feedback that they were providing. I think for your new superintendent coming in, not that you're not already doing it now, John, but having opportunities for focus groups throughout the year may be something that would be welcome from the feedback we got today. I would encourage you to be very specific around very specific topics, because you can spend an hour very, very quickly. So that would just be.
A quick question. I'm actually very surprised about the facilities complaints with all the prop eds work. Like, I am, seriously. Because, like, it's understood that we have a good, like, we've got over 100-year-old buildings. Totally get that. But we're doing, like, a lot of work. Did any of that come up in any of the conversations that you know?
The comments that came through that I would consider to be a theme would be the need for a well-communicated long-range facility plan, and for a new superintendent that would have had experience leading a bond or levy issue to be able to acquire additional resources to address facility needs. And that was across really all three.
Yeah, I think what's also supported that, they seem to be, there's been some good communication going on now, because they were really down in the weeds, particularly the the staff, in terms of the principals and the teachers, about assessed value not growing potentially as much as, and being landlocked, the district being a bit landlocked, and those concerns. And of course, they equated that to, that generates dollars to address facilities. So there was, it was pretty weedy conversation from several angles.
I would also point out that the conversations that I took away was that the district is using its resources, well, but that doesn't leave a lot for the building piece. That a bond levy issue was mentioned multiple times as the way to address the facility. It's not like the district's sitting on cash for facilities that they're not spending. It's how to get those resources. So.
I would say I'm not surprised because I'm an elementary parent, and in all our elementary schools, Bristol, Avery, Edgar, they're all aging facilities, and if you walk through them, the PTOs are doing a great job trying to help, but I have the same concerns because I think there's a perception that we have, like, there is a lot of wealth if you look at property values and our houses and what it costs, but we are landlocked, so a new superintendent has to know that you don't come in and there's not all, like, we don't have businesses, we don't have like big box Target money coming in or anything like that. So there has to be someone who understands the financial implications of doing what you can with what little we have with our aging facilities.
Curious if you guys had any surprises that stood out to you in terms of, obviously it's not surprising that different groups had different priorities, but was there a surprise for you all as you were conducting the focus groups or looking at the data? Is there anything that stood out for you all?
I have one. You guys help me, correct me, teachers or principals. In terms of teacher recruitment and retention, they spoke to how well they were compensated comparatively in the region. And there was talk about the board had really committed to that. Now, that also leaked over into the conversation Brian was talking about earlier, that, because they're not all school finance people, but the resources are in our people. And of course, research shows that's the most important thing we can do in the classroom. But so there was that, which from the districts I've served, that was refreshing for me to hear that you'd put teachers first, because I know, I say in the districts I've served, I was putting teachers first too, but that's not always a perception. So that was a bit of a surprise for me that I share with my colleagues immediately after the meeting. Anything else?
I think your teachers group actually mentioned the survey results not reflecting a strong student-centered response in the comments. So, that would be something that they certainly said would be very important to them as you're looking at your next superintendent, that they would be equally student-centered. So as we look, again, kind of the timeline going forward, this data helps us shape some draft questions for you. We'll be working on that over the next few weeks, getting you draft questions to then start, you're able to start massaging and creating however you want. You've got your posting went live beginning of this week. You've already got 4 applications started, 2 completed. I will tell you, 2 of them have already reached out and asked whether the search will be closed throughout, and that if it's not, they are going to probably withdraw, but they are going to withdraw. So that is something that we need to know on how to advise your applicants, because that obviously we know that's going to affect 2. So
I talked a little bit about that last time, about potentially opening it at the end, but I think we need to, as a board, come to a final decision. So as we move into the application process, we can communicate clearly to all of the interested candidates how we want that to go. I'm not sure if anyone wants to start the conversation. I'll just say, you know, from my perspective, my biggest concern is getting the biggest, strongest application pool, you know, of the most qualified people. That's my number one concern, probably all of our number one concerns, right? That's not a surprise. So whatever we think we need to do to recruit that pool is what my preference is, and that probably makes me lean a little towards closing it off if that's a perception we're getting, because I think, understandably, I think when people apply for jobs, particularly in what has become a politicized environment, that there might be some concern in their local districts that that could be used against them. I can understand that concern, but that's just a lean for me. I don't have a super strong opinion. I'd be curious what others think.
I just think, I'm not sure what purpose leaving it open at the end does, how that helps us. If it's going to limit our candidates, I would agree with you. I'd rather have it closed the whole way. I mean, having those 3 names out there at the end, I'm not sure what purpose that really serves, if it's going to limit who's willing to apply. Just my thoughts.
I have a question. I tend to agree, but in your experience in having done this before, how does having it open affect like your applicants? Obviously, you just said that some won't, but like, has it had a more negative effect than that you can?
It does have an effect for specific types of districts, your district being one of those. This is going to be considered a very, very attractive job. Your candidate pool is going, you know, I'm going to guess, and that's based on right now 4, and I know 2 of them specifically. They're coming from districts where they're doing well. Those districts are doing well. They're, at least what they've shared with us, they don't want to put themselves in a position where it's adverse to them if they don't get the position. For a lot of other districts, it's much easier for an applicant to go to their board and say, I'm looking at this job because it's very clearly a bigger, better job. In these positions, I'm not sure their communities would feel like they're not the best job. So, if that makes sense.
In short, I would say yes, and I would say in this region, particularly last year, with what we saw, it did have an impact on the openings last year.
So I would tend to say that I would want to leave it open in the finals. The superintendent is a community position. While I understand that the board hires and is responsible for, that's the only person we govern, so to speak, the superintendent is a role that serves everyone, every stakeholder in a school district. I think if we look at the focus groups, we look at all the feedback on the stakeholder survey, all the pieces about why the majority of the people on this board wanted the residential clause so badly. It's about the community piece. While I also understand very much so I very much so understand how competitive the pool is for highly qualified candidates. The other flip that I would present is that how many do we want to know if all of the positions are closed in this region? Let's say 7 superintendent positions are open. How do we not know that a candidate is applying for 3 or 4? Do we want a candidate that is just applying for our school district because they really just want ours? We've all got different search firms, Parkway, Kirkwood, us. We're all using different firms. So if it's closed, everyone's closing it all to the end. How do we also know that we're vetting a candidate that's applied across several? I'd rather know that we have a candidate that is completely committed to Webster Groves. We are not just a tiny little whatever district. I think we're a highly competitive district that is doing amazing work. I think our community really values the school system, and we can close it and announce a candidate. And if something were to come out after we've hired someone, it's too late. But if something were to be presented while it's open in the finals, we still have time. So that's just kind of my piece of the transparency. I believe in being transparent with the community. That's just how I believe in the hiring process, even though ultimately at the end, it is our decision as a board in terms of the majority vote. So that's just kind of how I stand.
Process was open or closed until the final 3 candidates. At what point, I mean, would community have the opportunity to weigh in at that point? I don't know exactly how the process will play out. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Thank you.
Like, what's the, I don't have our schedule committed to memory. So what's the time frame between when we would potentially make an announcement about 3 final candidates to the public to then be able to?
Good question. Okay,
Taken.
so December the 1st is when your application period closes. On the 4th, we will be back here presenting every single candidate that has applied for your position. We're gonna spend a considerable amount of time that night narrowing that down to the 6 to 8 that you want to screen. That would still remain, in this scenario, that would still remain a confidential process. It would still be closed, that we would not make public those 6 to 8 that are being screened. On the 12th, that would be the screening interviews. Then on that, at the conclusion of that night, you're going to make some decisions on who you want to move forward as your finalists, whether that's 2 or 3. And then that final interview date is scheduled for December the 17th. So on December the 12th, you're going to make a decision. If it's open, then what would typically happen is there would be a press release. Webster Groves has narrowed down their candidates to these 3 finalists. And then you'd have final interviews on the 17th, and then after those interviews, then again, you're going to take care of your required background checks, and once those have all cleared, then we can make the announcement, here's who the district has hired as your next superintendent. But as far as additional opportunities for public engagement, this was the survey and the focus groups were the opportunities for people to participate and give you feedback as to their thoughts around what are the things that they'd like to see in the next superintendent.
I guess if it's just a PR play on this is who the finalists are, that's where I'm like, I don't think that's worth losing potential candidates for. It's not like we're going to be engaging with the community anymore or anything. So I think I guess I lean more towards keeping it closed and using the information that we have, but then keeping the bench as big as it possibly can be and looking at the most qualified candidates.
Alex, it's not just a bigger pool. In this case, already we're seeing it could be cut by half, but also experienced folks would be the most likely to pull themselves out. And I would think I would want the most experienced pool possible as we're seeking a superintendent. And if closing it means that we would have that, I'm not opposed to that.
I think I agree. I mean, if the since the public is not necessarily going to be engaged anymore in the process, it's kind of, I totally get your point, Grace, but since they're not going to really be engaged in the process anymore, then, and if we can keep a better pool of applicants, then I would be leaning towards keeping it closed as well.
I think we've heard from everyone. Oh, sorry.
I really, I can see both sides of this. I think if we can have more candidates and more qualified, more highly qualified candidates with it closed, then I'm okay with it being closed.
I think, having heard from everyone, it sounds like closed is the decision for the board.
One thing we can do to help address
You're getting to know these candidates. Would you be able to share with us if they are also applying elsewhere?
that will be, yes, you will know that.
Okay.
As long as they're on.
I don't know if this makes sense, but if we keep the process closed, but let's say we get to the final 2 or 3 candidates and they are okay with us making it public that they're the final candidates, could we then do that as a kind of compromise maybe?
Anything else for questions for MSBA or anything else you guys have for us? I know you've had a good long day in the district, which we appreciate. Thank you for your time.
I appreciated getting to visit with all of those focus group members. And any other questions regarding any of the feedback data? I don't want to short you from. Okay, we'll
Okay.
get this information to you as well.
Hmm.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
Will we start to see who well, is that not till December 4th?
No, Monday.
Monday we'll start to see who is applying.
We have 2
Okay.
completed.
I hear things through the rumor mill, so I'm just curious. Okay.
Every
Yeah.
week you will get
Okay.
a file
Thank you.
with all of the completed
Okay.
applications. We have they were racing to be first. I said, it'll be a trickle, and they surprised me. We had 2 right out the gate. So.
Yeah. And just a reminder, next steps, obviously, we'll get updates from them every week on who has applied. We'll see all of that information. It will be open till December 1, and then we'll start going through that tiered list and having conversations after that.
It's open till December 3rd, right?
December 1st, application period closes. December 4th, we're actually here in a closed session to go through every applicant. get us through the Thanksgiving break so that everyone had
Yeah.
had time to.
December 1st is a Sunday evening, so they have through that night, and then we'll have on the 4th.
Fourth, we're just going over the applications. Are we actually meeting them, or are we just going?
No, we're
Okay.
just gonna review all of the applicants on their files.
Okay.
And then we're gonna, the board will narrow that down to the 6 to 8 that you want to.
Then we got it. Okay. Got it.
All right, as they transition away, next on the is Dr. Adams and a update.
All right. Well, good evening once again to all of you. I'm here to provide a brief overview of our strategic plan and the implementation. We are in year 2. I know all of you were a part of our strategic planning committee meeting a few weeks ago, maybe even last week, where we provided a lot of these updates to our community group, staff group. And so once again, I'll just go through the work that we have based on some of our goals. I'll be updating on other goals at a future meeting. Well, we'll just go this way. Strategies to be completed by summer 2025. So last year wrapped up our first year of implementation with our strategic plan. The next strategies that I'll be sharing, 4 or 5 of them, are due to be completed by the end of this upcoming summer 2025. The first strategy that we are focusing on and continuing to work on is around providing training for all of our K-5 classroom teachers, reading specialists, and administrators on structured literacy. As I've shared previously, the avenue through which we've chosen to offer that training is through the LETRS training offered through the state of Missouri. You can see there our staff participation in terms of where we are at in participating in the 2 volumes of LETRS training. Again, a big shout out to our finance and HR department for partnering with us to make this a reality. It's a very intense training, and in terms of incentives through that partnership, we've been able to offer our staff some really exciting opportunities to help in terms of financial incentives, but also moving forward in the salary ladder as well. The next strategy is focusing on collaborative learning teams. So again, groups of teachers coming together to review, analyze data, and make instructional decisions to support all of our students. We have continued the implementation of this work. Each building is in a different place related to this work. We've implemented and shared a rubric that buildings can self-assess where they are at. We've also, in the last year, done some behind-the-scenes things in terms of accountability and making sure that this is a priority. We've integrated CLTs into our school improvement process, which also ties in to Dr. Simpson's evaluation communication with building principals at the end of the year. So we've tried to align the CLT process, the strategy related to the CSIP, and tie that into evaluation work as well. We still have continued work to do and are in the middle of completing that. The next strategy has to do with looking at consistent transitions for students as they move throughout our system. So from Ambrose to elementary school, elementary to middle school, and so forth. We just initiated the implementation of this strategy for this year. We are focusing specifically on how we can best share student information across levels so that let's say at an elementary school, we have a support plan in place for Jason, for a student. We've used a few years to figure this out. We've partnered with families. How do we then communicate what's been successful for that student as they move to the next level? So how do we improve that communication? You can see here a few photos of our initial conversations, inviting our building principals and leadership to begin to brainstorm what that can look like and what our needs are. In addition to that, continuing to focus on our DEI and SEL surveys, Dr. Williamson and Tina Clark-Scott have taken the lead with this particular strategy. You can see there an overview of training and individual decisions that have been made related to the implementation of this work. We've also embedded conversations around DEI and SEL surveys in our principal data meetings in conjunction with our academic data, and we'll continue to look for ways to involve staff in using that data and also continuing to partner with families and communicate that as well. The next strategy has to do with the implementation of our new evaluation system. And Dr. Wiley Skinner, the PBTE team, and our HR department have done, again, a beautiful job of implementing this work. We continue to seek feedback from staff through that PBT effort, and then also through our district leadership team as we continue to move throughout the implementation of that. All right, these next set of strategy updates are strategies that we have just likely started to implement. They are not due at the end of this year. They are long-term, will be due in the summer of 2026. These are just the strategies for Goal 1 and Goal 2. We have not included Goals 3 and 4 this evening. The first strategy has to do with implementing more opportunities for experiential learning professional development that was mentioned earlier this evening. We kicked off this summer with our first Teacher Leadership Academy in experiential learning. You can see there several images. Keita Quinn was there as one of our guest speakers related to a service project that we're doing as part of that work. And we've been partnering with the Society for Experiential Education. Our teachers will end up receiving a credential from the Society of Experiential Education after they go through 6 blocks of training throughout this year. So this summer we kicked off the first 2 blocks of training. We have another one coming up in October, one in February, and then 2 more in June. After that, we'll start our second year and take another cohort of teachers through this same experience, and we'll continue so for the next 2 years. In conjunction with the rollout of the new evaluation system, in partnership with the HR department and Dr. Wiley Skinner, we've been partnering with Dr. Patty Coram, who started last year and continues this year, to provide our building leaders and district leaders with opportunities to engage in professional learning around how to give feedback and what feedback looks like in terms of improving instructional practice for students. And so we continue that work. Just anecdotally, we had a principal share earlier this week in their building CSIP meeting that this is the most powerful professional development that they've participated in a long time. And so we're really excited about the conversations and the connections that our building leaders are making. In addition to that, Mr. Myers and myself, we are leading a task force, initiating a task force this year that will allow us to do this particular strategy and the next strategy, which looks at auditing our supplemental educational experiences. So what are the various fees? What are the different requirements, barriers that are currently required of families and students to participate in opportunities outside of the school day? And what is standing in the way of families choosing to participate as well. And part of that work will be for us to audit what's currently happening, but then to also move into creative problem solving around how we can best pursue grants, pursue community partnerships, etc., to try to remove some of those barriers. That then connects, as I shared, to this next strategy, which focuses on expanding free extracurricular and after-school learning opportunities. The images that are here are of a pilot program that we've initiated at Givens this year. We have about 30 elementary students participating in partnership with Peace United Church of Christ every Tuesday and Thursday in the fall and in the spring for 8 weeks. We are offering a Freedom Schools program, which provides an opportunity for community building, but then academic reinforcement for math and literacy. And you can see there different images of our volunteers who are working with their small groups of students to support this work. I don't want to get too into the weeds with this, but I'm super excited about this program. The feedback from the mentors, it's so exciting. They light up when they see the kids. And the data, I'm curious, we are following the data of students participating through our regular district measures, and so I'm curious to see what that looks like through this pilot. And then finally, the strategy for Goal 2, which has to do with pathways, is looking specifically at enhancing our college and career partnerships. Brian mentioned this earlier when we were speaking about the FRIC, Center for Civic Engagement. Just being able to establish a partnership with WashU, which we haven't up to this point been able to do. We also have established a partnership with Webster University for dual credit for the teaching and learning cohort. So in addition to that, we have all of our MOUs and partnerships for dual credit with our state schools in the area, and just continuing to look for every opportunity we can to provide access, to make connections for our students and families, and we'll continue to focus on this. And at this point, what questions do you have?
A question about CLTs. How does that work for specialists in like the elementary school? Is there a group of art or music teachers that have the opportunity to?
Yeah, so one positive takeaway from COVID and the pandemic was Zoom and everyone having to learn how to use that. And so oftentimes on our late starts, our specialists, so the vocal music teachers get together, the art teachers get together. We also, on various PD days, they've been requesting more opportunities to get together, to collaborate. And through our program evaluation process, we've actually had a lot more conversation. Actually, prior to the board meeting tonight, I met with the fine arts group, and they're asking for more time, not just amongst the elementary group, but how do we talk K-5? How do we get high school people in the room with elementary folks, especially if you're what I call a singleton, you're the only person that teaches this content area. And so we're also not only looking for how to provide that support within the district through the CLT piece, but I've also been talking with my colleagues in other districts who are similar in size. And is there a way that cross-district we can perhaps get a support plan in place to create a multiple district kind of CLT for some of our fine arts folks? And so there's a lot of interest. It's just time to make that happen. And so, but there is a lot of interest in that. Mm-hmm.
I have two hopefully quick questions. I was at the last strategic meeting, so I was privy to some conversations that maybe others might be interested in. Can you kind of explain? I was able to ask about the letters program and what the teachers go through. Would you maybe be able to explain like why that's been so important for them?
Sure. So I started off participating in letters training, and I've shared just again anecdotally with folks who are willing to listen that it's a really difficult professional experience. It was difficult for me, and I often equate the experience in letters to what I experienced in my graduate program to become a reading specialist. Just the level of case study work, drilling down to specific student interventions, the level of research and data analysis. A lot of that doesn't happen in an undergraduate literacy program. And so until you make that decision to become a reading specialist or to dive further into that work, you really don't have that opportunity to engage in that. And so it is very explicit. There's a lot of homework involved in completing between just the sessions. So it's not just showing up to a workshop. There's case study, they're collecting data, looking at individual kids. I shared that I've talked with reading specialists, with teachers who at times have been in tears, just frustrated by, they want to do it. They want to teach all day. They want to engage in this work. They're committed to doing it, which again is why it's been so important to partner with HR and finance to be able to provide these incentives. And you can tell based on the data that we do have a lot of interest, but it is very, very difficult to participate. But they will also say, once I get through it, it's some of the best experience and some of the best development that I've had. And they feel completely different in terms of teaching reading. Yeah.
The second question is about the after-school programs. Are we at a point, or do you anticipate being at a point where you could ask for more volunteers to be able to expand it? And will that be communicated out to the community for people who might be interested?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So the idea, I mentioned pilot, the idea was, and the reason we selected Givens for multiple reasons, but one of the key areas was that part of the Freedom Schools After School Club program has to do with some of the structures and features that Givens already implements. So you all have heard, I believe, a few years ago about their Harambe experience and coming together. That's a hallmark of the Freedom Schools experience. And so we decided to go to Givens. The kids were used to that structure, so we would build upon that. At the same time, looking at our achievement data, hearing feedback from the community, this was definitely a need and a need from the staff. And so that's why we selected Givens. But the idea is, and we've communicated this with our community partners, is to take this pilot, if successful, and then hopefully expand some sort of program across our district elementary schools that would then invite additional volunteers to come in and provide that support for our kiddos. I'm very thankful that we were able to receive a grant to afford us the opportunity to be able to provide transportation after Freedom Schools, et cetera, so that we can try to remove some of those barriers for kiddos participating. So again, the idea is a trial run this year, see what we can do going forward, but we're excited by, I think this is week 3, by what we've experienced so far.
Any other questions for Dr. Adams? Seeing none. Thank you. Thank you for continuing to push this forward and having the conversations. It's been good. All right, next on the agenda, our consent agenda items.
I move to approve consent agenda items 6.01, 6.02, 6.03, 6.04, 6.05, 6.06, 6.07, and 6.08.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, that carries 7-0. I would entertain a motion to recess into executive.
So moved.
All right, roll call vote, Ms. Davis.
Yes.
We'll take a short 5-minute recess and be back here for executive. Thank you all.